Welcome to VERITAS. Don't forget to hit subscribe and the notification bell so you never miss our latest episodes. Please like this video, comment below with your thoughts, and share it with others seeking truth. For more exclusive content and to support our mission, visit VERITAS7.com.
The questions you always had. The answers you were never given. The place to seek the truth. Welcome to VERITAS.
Tonight on VERITAS, our special guest is Charles J. Poloka. Charles is not just a researcher or investigator. He says he is a precog. That means he has received visions of events before they occurred. Some of them saved his life. Others warned of major public incidents. In at least one case, he was a key witness in court. His testimony was on the record. But this interview is about more than what he saw. It is about what we are all capable of. We will explore how he receives these visions, what they feel like, and what happens when he acts on them. We will ask him to walk us through the moments where life and death hung in the balance. He believes this ability is not rare, it is natural, and it can be awakened. Charles also brings insight into subjects most never dare to confront. From childhood UFO sightings to night vision skywatching, from the effects of high-frequency technologies to first-hand spiritual warfare, his story crosses into hidden territories that are affecting us all. Whether or not you believe in prophecy, visions, or fate, this is a conversation that might change the way you think about your own instincts, your own signals, your own warnings. Charles J. Poloka is coming up next. Welcome to VERITAS. If this is your first time listening, welcome home. To access tonight's full interview and all of our exclusive material, simply join the Veritas Plus family by clicking on the subscribe button at Veritas7.com. While you're there, don't forget to visit the Veritas store, featuring a range of great products, including Focus Life Force Energy. Experience the benefits with a 15-day free trial of FLFE, no credit card required. Also, be sure to explore our enhanced Veritas Plus transcripts, offering full transcripts, comprehensive analysis, and exclusive insights for every episode. As a Veritas Plus member, you'll receive a 50% discount on these enhanced transcripts. Want to get in touch? Be a guest on the program? Suggest someone or share feedback? Just click the contact button at Veritas7.com. So sit back, relax, and enjoy tonight's program. And directly from Lafayette, California, I'd like to welcome Charles Poloka. Hello, Charles, and welcome to VERITAS.
Hello, Mel. Happy to be here.
My pleasure. Charles, you have a very interesting story, but let me just, a quick parenthesis right from the beginning. Usually we have technical difficulties once in a while. People remember, those of you who have been with us for many years, remember the Dr. Paul Laviolette issue where we got disconnected many, many times. Well, today, as I'm approaching the studio, I come in and every single computer, backup computers, all of them at the same time, they had a compulsory update to take, place. So I had to push the buttons for all of them. Well, when we came back, none of them were functional. So we had to wait 45 minutes until we were able to get one of them to work. So I'm glad that you are here. And your story probably is very coincidental as to what is happening with us today. But you said something interesting that I didn't know. Charles approached me a few weeks ago because a very interesting story. In 2009, something happened to you, and then we'll go into your story.
Okay. I'm one of the people that's heavily affected by all the frequencies. So the 3G, 4G, and 5G have really impacted my life. And in 2008, the crash and the frequency, I wound up, I was 6 weeks away from finishing the job I was on, and I was booked 2 years out. I had 2 more houses to build, and I lost them both because of the crash. And I also wound up having breathing difficulties so bad that I almost died and wound up in the hospital. And this was right after the 4G was turned on here. So I wound up out of work in 2008, and I dove in. I've been a researcher for a long time, and I went in hard. And I was exposing a few things, and one was 9/11. So I was very active on a number of YouTube videos, and I received a private message in my YouTube mailbox that said, people who behave the way you're behaving have a funny way of leaving us all a little early.
Wow.
So I knew what it was, and I immediately responded. This was on a Thursday. And I said, buddy, if you think you got something for me, bring it. My dad didn't call me the fox for no reason. So that was my message back. Monday morning, unmarked car wash in my house, black. I pulled out. The guy tipped his head down so his ball cap covered his face, and he put his hand next to his face to cover his profile. So I knew when my mirror would connect with his mirror, and I had my window down, and I looked in my mirror, and he immediately looked in his mirror, and I pointed in his face and said, gotcha. But they didn't like that. I climbed my neighbor's fence the next time he was here and set up my camera and took pictures of him. I threw a stone and it hit the door of his car, and I took pictures and then started posting them online and said, this is the guy watching my house. Well, then I came home the next day and my computer didn't start up. I took it to a guy that I knew that I could trust because I had a lot of things in there I didn't want other people seeing. And he asked me what I was into, that it was a professional hack. It was not a virus. And I lost everything. I'm a general contractor. I lost all my bidding. Everything was gone. Pictures, emails, everything gone. No recovery of anything. So it was not a good year for me.
You mentioned 4G, so I'm assuming that you're familiar with the work of the late Arthur Fistenberg.
Yes.
Interesting that probably about 3 months before he passed away, we were trying to get in touch with him for years, but he was finally going to come on, and then all of a sudden, boom, he passed away.
Wow.
But you have a very interesting story. When you came to me, you basically, the title of this program, for those who are listening, Seeing Tomorrow, Conversations with a Precognitive Witness. To those who don't understand what precog means, can you elaborate?
I've been having visions since I was a young boy, and the visions generally come like 4, 5, 6 months before the event. And then on the day of the event, 5 to 6 minutes before, I start getting sick in my stomach, and I get sicker and sicker the closer I get to the event. And in the last, probably around 60 seconds, my hands and feet start going to sleep like the pins and needles. And it's easy for me to recognize the situation. And I actually figured this out when my sister crashed her bike one day. I had the full thing put together of what was going on. And that was below 10 years old.
Before 10 years old. So when you were a child in Appalachia, what's your earliest memory of having a vision?
That was my first one. There were other things that happened where I wasn't quite sure if it was a deja vu, but that one, I singled it out and I had it nailed. What was going on and how to recognize it when it comes about the next time.
Is this something that you think you got through generations, or is something that you discovered? How early did you discover you had these abilities?
By 10 years old. And when I mentioned it to my mother, she mentioned that my mom has them. Her mother never talked to her about them, but her grandma had them as well.
And UFOs too. You have encounters with UFOs, right?
Yes, that was in Pennsylvania. Well, it was common in our area that people were seeing them all the time, and they tended to hang over our next door neighbors. She had some of the biggest oak trees I'd ever seen. They had to have been 80 feet tall, And there were like 5 of them in a row. And that's where we would see them over top of those trees.
Any experiences with some of these beings?
Well, yes, I've had some things go on, and my sister as well, seeing faces in the window, waking up outside in the middle of the night. My sister says that it went on for her well into her 30s, even when she moved to a different area. So, but I grew up in Wexford, Pennsylvania. This is pretty far out of Pittsburgh, 45 minutes, 50 minutes out.
You were in the military, right? Air Force, thank you for your service. During that time, did you learn or did you experience anything, or were you being seen as somebody with special abilities?
No. Like I mentioned to you before, the plane crash in 1988 is the first time that it was really recognized by anyone else.
Well, tell us that story. You told me that story in private.
Okay, so I was chosen to work on during the air show, which in Germany is called Flugtag, and that was in 1988. The airfield commander actually asked me personally to be there because they figured out that I was the best at cleaning the taxiways and runways, that they had no airplane damage when I was on duty, the engine damage. So he had asked me to work, and he asked me to cook some burgers for him. And he told me to meet him on taxiway 10, that he would be hanging out at the medevac helicopters, and for me to come on over and join him when I got there. So the day of the air show, my wife joined a bunch of our friends, and I said my goodbyes and told my wife they had fun and told her where I was going. So she watched me drive over and park at the there's a big parking lot over there with some planes on it. And she watched me walk over to the medevac helicopters. Well, shortly after, the air show started, and the Italian jets took off and they were doing their stunts. And the day prior, I had videotaped the stunt that they had crashed doing the next day. And when I was recording, when they did the heart maneuver, where the plane comes from the back, it felt like my heart stopped beating. I almost threw up. I pushed the camera away from my head because I was videotaping the whole thing. And my wife said, "What's the matter? You're white as a ghost. Maybe you should go get something to eat." And at that point, I had realized that was going to happen the next day. I was like, oh my God, the vision. So the next day, I'm at the taxiway, and I start getting sick in my stomach, and I'm realizing, oh my God, this is where one of the planes is going to land. How do I tell these people that we need to walk away from here? So I just looked at the people and I said, look, listen to me. We've all got to walk away from here right now. And, I got some funny looks. The airfield commander looked me in the face, and this was a full bird colonel, pretty high ranking guy. So he looked at me, and then he continued his conversation with the helicopter pilot. And I think about a minute went by, and I said it again. And at that point, what I didn't realize is the blonde woman with the little blonde girl next to the colonel was the wife and daughter of the pilot. And she looked at me, and she realized I was getting excited, and she put her arm around her daughter and turned her away from me and started walking her away. Well, then again, I said, we need to walk away from here right now. And the airfield commander looked me in the face, and he said, Sergeant, what is going on? And I said, sir, just listen to what I'm saying. We all need to walk away from here right now. Are you with me or not? So I had started up my hibachi because I was going to cook burgers for him when I got out of the sweeper. So I started walking over to throw the burgers on. And when I got 45 feet away, the sickness in my stomach went away. So I knew from previous events that I was then safe. So I turned and looked back and saw that my friend, Sergeant, another guy, and the airfield commander had turned and started walking with me. So I went over, threw the burgers on the grill, and the airfield commander put his head down on the table and said, excuse me, I'm so tired. I haven't slept in 3 days. I'm just going to put my head down for a few minutes. Well, a few minutes later is when the plane crash happened. And I immediately yelled, "Sir, wake up. There's been a plane crash." And he picked up his head and looked at me and said, "Don't you ever." And he realized that all he could hear was all this screaming. And he looks over at the medevac helicopters and they're on fire.
Want the full story? This is just part one. Now offering video interviews and discounted transcripts for members. Become a VERITAS Plus member today at veritas7.com.
Because the plane landed about 45 feet away and rolled over onto the medevac helicopters. And he stood there for the longest time, staring me in the face, just not even knowing what to say, because he realized that if he were still standing there, it would be over.
And what happened after?
Well, he never said, well, he took my radio and put me on the runway, guarding one of the pilot's bodies. Told me not to leave. It was 3:16. He came back. He told me not to leave until he relieved me. He came back at 11:15, something like that, and relieved me and was surprised I was still there. And at that time, I called my wife because they thought I was dead. They never saw me walk away from the helicopters, and they saw the helicopters on fire, and they thought it was somebody playing a joke. My wife didn't. She thought I was dead. She thought she saw what happened, but she never saw me walk away. So yeah, 86 people died. One plane cartwheeled into the crowd. And I had told 24 people the day before the show. There were 24 of us working. And I said, "You guys need to know there's going to be a bad plane crash tomorrow. Get your head prepared for that, because that's what we're going to be dealing with tomorrow." And one of my friends, who I'm still friends with on Facebook, came up in my face and just started screaming at me, "Chuck, you don't say things like that. That's really not right. You just don't do that."
Right.
And I said, "Bob, listen to what I'm saying. I have these visions, and the events happen exactly like I see them. It's going to happen tomorrow. There's nothing we can do."
I mean, we live in a society when you say something like that, 2 minutes later, you have the FBI knocking on your door. Especially if it happens then more questioning comes your way. Were you ever questioned by the authorities?
And of course, the commander had his hands so full for so long that I'm sure that he had to have thought at some point that he should get a hold of me, but he never did.
What other precognition stories do you have?
So the first one that was really bad was when I was in 6th grade. We were some of the bad boys that would climb the fence at the batter's cage, and we would go up on top. We'd lay up there, and then we'd get scolded and get down. And the one day,
you and me, I used to love doing that.
Oh yeah, it was fun. So there was a friend, Chris, my best friend, Bill Smythe, and Chris used to climb this fence with us. And I had a vision of Chris falling. And it came to the day that it was going to happen. And I started getting sick in my stomach, and Chris was climbing the fence. And I started screaming, Chris, come down. You got to come down. And because I realized he was wearing the clothes that he was wearing in my vision. So I started yelling, and he stopped, and he turned around and looked, and he kind of looked at me funny because I started getting excited and repeating it. And my friend Bill put his arm around me and turned me around. He said, "Charlie, stop. You're making a fool of yourself. Stop." And I said, "Bill, you don't understand. If he climbs that fence today, this is it for him." So at that point, Bill was convinced. My fingers and my feet had the pins and needles, and Bill turns around and he screams as loud as he can, "Chris, stop." Well, at that point, Chris had gone out the section that goes out. He had reached his arms underneath and latched his fingers onto the fence, and then flipped his legs off the fence.
Oh.
And he had never done that before. And when he flipped his legs off, it was too much for his hands to hold on to the fence, and his hands slipped off. So if you think about the rotation, when he hit the ground, his forehead hit the ground first, and it bent his neck all the way backwards, and then his body came down on top of his head. And I mean, you heard the cracking of his neck, and he never moved again. That was it. He went away in an ambulance, and he was a quadriplegic.
So he survived, but is he still alive?
But it was still alive, yep.
What, the person who said, stop it, you're making a fool out of yourself, after this happened, what did they say?
He was blown away, and he went home and told his parents what happened, and that I had tried to stop him, and that I said I had this vision of it happening, and I knew it was going to happen. So his mom said, you invite that boy over. I need to talk to him. So he invited me over, and I went on the school bus to his house, and his mom told me, his mom and dad were both half American Indian, so they understood what I had.
Oh, okay.
And she said, you're a gifted child, and you did what you're supposed to do. You tried to help Chris, but you need to understand that people aren't going to understand what you're saying to them. And you need to know that it's not your fault if they don't listen and do as you say. You've got to be able to get through that.
This is the mother talking?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes. So
the question is, because before you said that it actually happened, have you had visions where you actually see the event but are able to stop it?
yes. So the first one that I stopped was when I built my 68 Camaro. I had another car accident thing with my brother, and I warned him, and it wasn't a very bad accident, but it was one of my visions. It was going to happen. And then there was another friend of his, Bob, and they were minor collisions, but I had the vision, and I was injured in the crashes. So then my 68 Camaro, I had a vision of me getting killed. And I built the car from the ground up. It was a complete restoration. I rebuilt all the suspension. And when I put the front suspension together, I did it on the patio behind the house. And you know how people put the redwood in between the slabs of concrete?
Yes.
Okay. One of the cotter pins for the front ball joints fell down in, and I tried to get it out with a coat hanger and couldn't get it out. And I figured, oh, no big deal. I'll leave it. One day I'll pick one up at the parts store and I'll put it in. So I left the outside right side it was outer ball joint. I left that, or outer tie rod. It's the steering. I left that pin out because it's fairly easy to get to. So the day that the crash was going to happen, I had been driving the car for a couple of weeks, and I was supposed to drive it to the parts store to let the guy see it because I had taken it the previous weekend and all the guys got to see it. But then the other crew works the next weekend, and I was pulling it out of the garage, and I was getting sick in my stomach. And I remembered my vision, and I was like, oh no, not today. So I parked the car halfway in and out of the garage, came in the house and got my truck keys. And my wife said, what are you doing? And I said, I'm taking my truck. And she said, well, why? Aren't the guys going to be disappointed? You're supposed to take your car. And I said, yes, I'm taking my truck. So I drove my truck. And when I got up the freeway to where the crash site was, from where I would have crashed into the post to where the car stopped, my heart stopped beating. And I got like cold. And so the crash itself, I left the house in the car. I was going up 680, Interstate 680, which is the East Bay. And a Mustang came up next to me and pushed in the clutch and revved the gas. And he then hit the gas and took off. So I hit the gas and took off. Well, my car was 635 horsepower, pretty fast car with a 5-speed. And I looked down at my speedometer. I was doing 130 miles an hour, and I was coming up to the bridge where 242 goes over 680, and something broke on my car. The car pulled hard to the right, and I smashed into the concrete that holds the bridge up and spun off of it and went up the freeway like 200 to 300 yards past. I bounced off the median guardrail and then stopped on the road all the way up past the bridge. And the last part of the vision was a cop was pulling a cover over me, and a fire truck pulled up, and the guy came up with the big they used to use those Samsonite suitcases for their first aid kits. That's what he had in his right hand. It looked like a Samsonite suitcase. And the cop looked up at the fireman and said, "There's nothing we can do for him. He's gone." So that's what my vision was. And when I went home, my son was 5 years old. And I told my son, "Come outside. I need you to see something. You're not going to understand this now, but when you're older, I'm going to tell you what was going to happen today. But you have to see this." And my wife wouldn't come out. So I jacked up my car and I looked at my outer tie rod and I saw it was loose. I turned the nut 1 1/4 turns and the tie rod end fell out. It fell down into the wheel. So that would have allowed me to get up the freeway about 3 or 4 miles. Maybe, I forget how far that is, probably close to 5 miles. And that's where it would have fallen out.
That is incredible. And the thing is that a lot of people, correct me if I'm wrong, but they have these abilities when they're young. I remember I used to say certain things. Now I realize that most children have it. But adults, they tell you, don't talk about this. You're sounding like a fool. Don't, and eventually it just goes away because you want to just mask it. So how do you know this was different when you were little, like you were different than others because you have these abilities?
Well, a few times I tried to talk to people, like when my sister crashed her bike. In Pennsylvania, they cinder the road in the winter. They don't use salt. So the cinders help you get a grip in the icy conditions. And what happened is my sister started going toward the edge of the road, and then she turned her front wheel kind of sharp, and it slid out, and she hit the cinders and went down. And so I helped her clean the cinders out of her knees, and then I started kind of laughing, and she said, "It's not funny. Don't laugh." And I said, "No, I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing because I knew this was going to happen today. I got sick in my stomach when I was riding behind you. And the closer we got to the hill, I realized, oh no, Kim's going to crash going down the hill." And then you crashed. So, people, they can't accept that information.
They can't accept it,
or they don't know what it is. It was difficult, so I just didn't tell people. I just did what I could to help them.
Exactly. You try, and what the Native Americans told you, this is something that they understand. You have the gift, you use it. But what is it about this society that tends to ignore ridicule these abilities?
I think it's because we've been pulled so far into the material world that's what makes it go away. And I also think that the part of the brain that's responsible for the pineal gland is being damaged by the heavy metals in the vaccines, and that may play a part as well.
I sometimes wonder, you see, a lot of the old languages, they were read from right to left. All of a sudden, now we read from left to right, and things were inverted in many ways. I wonder if this was on purpose, Charles.
Exactly, and the calendar as well.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah, the calendar used to be 28 days. It was very predictable. It went with the moon. All of a sudden, it turned to the sun, I believe.
Right. And you know that the turtles had the
The 13, yes,
10 and 28?
that's right. Exactly. And how come astrologers, whenever I have astrologers, I ask them, why is it that we don't consider Ophiuchus? That's another constellation, another zodiac sign. But they don't talk about it. Everybody talks about the 12 constellations, but the Ophiuchus one, it's hidden.
That's right.
So you said your vision saved your life 3 times.
Yes. There was another one, my same friend.
17 seasons of uncensored interviews. While you're hearing part 1 with ads, Veritas Plus members get part 2 immediately, plus video interviews and discounted transcripts. Become a Veritas Plus member today at veritas7.com.
Bill, my mom and I didn't get along, and my mom threw me out when I was in high school. And I called my friend and he knew my mom abused me seriously, and they were aware of it, and they had offered to call people that would help. And I just felt that it would make the situation worse. So I told them no. And my mom eventually threw me out, and I called my friend Bill and said, hey, my mom threw me out. And he said, hey, let me call my mom. He called his mom, and he called me back, and he said, Charlie, my mom said, you get your butt over to the house. She'll have a bedroom cleaned up for you before you can get there. So she took me in. And while I was living with him, actually the vision was before I was living with them. And I told Bill, when we left his house, there were 2 ways to go out to Route 8. And the upper way was a nice long straightaway that came up to a stoplight. And the other way was kind of the backwoods way. And I said to Bill, Bill, one day we're going to be driving here, and you're going to be going through the gears hard, and I'm going to scream to you to stop. And you have to listen to me and stop. I said, you remember Chris? And he said, yes. And I said, well, I had a vision of us getting in a bad crash out here at the accident, or at the intersection. So I'll let you know. So that day came, and we left the house. I was already sick in my stomach when we were getting ready to leave. And that intersection is less than 2 minutes from his house. So by the time we got into the car and we had left, I was getting the pins and needles. My hands and feet were going to sleep. And Bill turned right onto that straightaway and started going through the gears. And we got halfway down the straightaway, and I screamed, Bill, stop. And I saw his eyes go up to his rearview mirror, and he slammed on the brakes and stopped as quickly as he could. And ahead of us, after we stopped, comes this car flying through the intersection. Our light was green, and that's part of why Bill was hard on the gas. He was going to try to make the green light. Well, that car went speeding through the intersection and ended up crashing at the next light. He ran into cars. And the cops said that he was doing between 80 and 90 miles an hour when he crossed through that intersection. And in my vision, he ran into us broadside, passenger side first. So that was my second one. And then there was another. Yep.
Yeah, how clear was the warning, and how do you act on it then?
Well, my visions are very, very detailed. And what I found out is in the third incident where I was going to be killed, I had the vision. And then after that day, I had gone dirt bike riding, and I came home and I sat down in front of my computer and I meditated. And when I meditated, I had been thinking about my other motorcycle, my street bike, and I had a flashback of the vision. And when I had the flashback, I was able to pause it. I was like, oh, wait, what is that? While the vision was going on, I said to myself, oh, wait, what is that? I should look at that closer. And it was like I zoomed right in on it and was looking at it. So I was able to do that with the vision after originally having it, which is what I figured out. That was 2008 that accident happened.
So one of these incidents even made it into court records. What happened there?
So that was the motorcycle. I had the vision, and I told my wife, and I have a Kawasaki Ninja ZX14, which is blue. It's the bright blue metallic. And I had a vision of me getting killed on a motorcycle. And I went to my wife and I said, oh my God, I had another one of my visions of me getting killed. And the motorcycle was like yellow orange colored. And I was hit from behind by a BMW 750. And it was like baby blue colored. And he hit me so hard that I couldn't even identify the motorcycle after the accident. And I hit the windshield and popped like 20 feet in the air above the car and landed on the road after the car passed under me. And my wife goes, well, you don't have a yellow motorcycle, so it's not going to happen. Well, come December, I had started riding with some guys that were ex-pro racers. And we started going through the Napa Hills. And we went hard. I mean, they were racing, but they were on the street, and they told me I needed to buy a lighter bike, which in turn, I bought a ZX10, which is only 433 pounds. It's over 100 pounds lighter than my other bike and almost the same horsepower.
Was it yellow?
Yep. And so the day I brought it home, I parked it out back. Then the Saturday, I bought it on Friday. Saturday, my wife was sitting on the porch reading, and I pulled it out on the front. I pulled it out to the street and washed it and pulled it on the front lawn and waxed it. After I waxed it, I meditated. I laid down on the ground, stretched my back, and then meditated. And I looked at my wife and I said, oh my God, this is the bike from my vision. And she said, what are you talking about? And I said, remember my vision? And you said it's not going to happen because you don't have a yellow bike. And she goes, oh, whatever. And I said, well, this is it. So I ordered custom plates for the bike, and the custom plates came in. That day I had come home from work early because I was finishing up a job. So I was grabbing, tools and materials and bringing them home. And my wife had come home at lunchtime, and she said, hey, your custom plate came in if you want to go down to DMV and get it. So I had driven up the hill. I had a friend that I used to take dirt biking, and his son would ride on my bike with me, and he would follow. And I had gone up the hill to ask him if he wanted to go dirt biking this weekend. And when I came down the hill, there was a BMW 750, baby blue, the powder blue color. And the guy was parked on a very tight curve. That's a blind curve. And so I rolled my window down, and I was going to say, hey, that's not a good place to park. Maybe you should move. But I saw the guy on the phone, red-faced, screaming into his phone. So I just pulled away. I figured the guy's obviously having a bad day. So I came home, got the letter, and decided I'm going to go down to DMV and get my plates. So I pull my bike out to the street, start putting my gear on. I put earplugs in and a jacket and gloves. And I was putting my helmet on. And after I pulled the bike out on the street, I was getting sick in my stomach. By the time I got onto the bike to ride away, my hands and feet started getting the pins and needles. And I said, oh my God, today's the day.
That's your sign. That's every time this happens. Is that how you feel your stomach and you get numb?
Yes. And then within the last 60 seconds, my hands and feet start getting the pins and needles, like your foot's gone to sleep from.
Exactly. Yeah. Like numb. Right.
So I remembered the air show that I walked away, and when I was safe, the feelings went away. So I put my feet on the ground and I waited for the feelings to go away, and boom, everything went away instantly. So I instantly let out the clutch and pulled out. I went to the stop sign, which is about 100 yards, made a left turn. The next stop sign is maybe 125 yards down the hill. And the baby blue BMW comes sliding out in front of me, blew the stop sign 25, 30 miles an hour, sliding sideways, throwing gravel. So I realized immediately, oh my God, this is the car. And I pulled out and I marked his speed in 3 places. When he passed the field goal posts at Acalanes High School, he was doing between 80 and 90 miles an hour.
In front of a school?
Yes, right next to the school. And he ran into the back of the traffic sitting still at the stoplight. When he hit the first car, he hit it so hard that it was a Miata. And the front suspension collapsed. And the bolts that bolt the A-arms on drug on the road and left 2 gouges in the road. And then it hit the car in front of it and it went airborne. It flew about 70 feet, hit a pole and landed upside down on Pleasant Hill Road.
Did they survive?
So my immediate thing was I flew up, parked next to the BMW, went over to see if I could give any aid to the guy, and another guy had already gotten out of his car and said, he's gone. So I went over to the guy in the BMW and I said, I saw what you did and I'll be there in court to make sure that you pay for this.
Oh.
And
what about the Miata driver?
Well, the Miata driver was dead.
But also.
Yeah. Oh, no, he's the one that died. The BMW guy was fine because his airbag.
Oh, I got confused. Sorry.
Yeah.
So,
all right. So the Miata person died, obviously. I mean, it's a small car. What year is this?
I had the vision on November 23rd of 2007, and the accident was March 22nd of 2008. And if anybody wants to look it up, the guy's name is David Caspillo. You can look it up, and you can also find the court records, and the public can access they write everything down. They have a woman there that does that during the hearings.
Yeah.
So I directed traffic until a police officer showed up, and a couple cars showed up at the same time. And the one cop came over and said, somebody just told me that you were the witness, that you were following this guy. And I said, yes. And I said, can I go home and get my camera? I live, a quarter mile away. And he said, yes, but you have to come back. He asked me for my driver's license. So I went back, and when I went back and they were asking me what I saw, I gave them all my statements. And then he asked me what I saw with when the van hit the car in front of it. And I started answering the question. And I said, oh, wait, I can't give you that information. And he said, what do you mean you can't give me the information? I said, I can't tell you that. You have to scratch that. And he said, well, what you were saying is correct. Someone else gave the same statement. Well, why are you stopping in the middle of it? He didn't understand. Well, I had realized that was what I saw in my vision.
Oh, I see.
Since I was behind the van, I didn't see that day. And therefore, I was technically giving him false information.
But it was something that somebody else corroborated as true.
Correct. So when we wound up in court, the defense asked why he said what was said, and then he asked why I stopped.
So the BMW driver survived?
Correct.
Wow.
So I looked at the judge and I looked at the jury and I said, Your Honor, do you understand what a precog is? And he said, yes, I do. And I looked at the jury and there were 2 women. One of them almost stood up and was telling me, go on, go on. And there was another woman shaking her head and motioning with her hand for me to go on. So I knew that they understood what it was and that they would explain it to the rest of the jury. So I told the judge that information came. I said I had a vision on November 23rd, and that's I realized I started giving him information from the vision. That's why I stopped. And he said, can you keep your vision separate from today's proceedings? And I said, yes, Your Honor, I can.
Because what you were saying is not admissible in a court of law?
Well, right. Anything that I give them, well, he didn't want anything from the vision, and that can't be used in court.
It has to be off the record, yes.
Correct. So what I found very interesting about that whole thing is, I think I told you I learned to do out of body and I did remote viewing.
Mm-hmm.
So I learned to quiet my mind. And so after I had the vision of the accident, I knew that most accidents happen within a couple miles of your house because it's the most commonly traveled area. And so I kept stopping places.
Loving this interview? We have 17 seasons of content just like this, plus part 2 of every episode, all ad-free for Veritas Plus members. Become a member today at veritas7.com.
Every time I stopped, I would clear my mind. I would think about the accident and then I would clear my mind. Well, one day I stopped at that stoplight and I cleared my mind. And I knew that that was the place it was going to happen. But what was really interesting is I couldn't understand. In my vision, I saw a roadway that was 4 lanes wide and it had no lines on it. And it was very dark black. And, you know, driving around, I'm looking at the road. It's got all its lines on it there and it's got arrows for the turning lanes. And so the week of the crash on Monday and Tuesday, they ground the road down to repave it. And they repaved it. So come the day of the crash, there were no lines on the road. It hadn't been painted yet. Wow. That's why in my vision, there were no lines on the roads. There were just these little white reflectors. And the thing that I looked when I came home from dirt bike riding and I had a flashback of the vision, the thing that I looked at was one of those little white markers because I didn't remember seeing those on the day of the crash. But they were there and I went back in my pictures because I ran home and got my camera and they were there in my pictures, but I didn't recall seeing them that day.
Obviously, the defendant was probably, I haven't read the case, but I'm assuming that he was declared guilty as charged. No?
It's unbelievable what happened. Well, actually, I knew the guy that died. He was, I belonged to a gun club where we do skeet shooting. And he was a guy that came up he was a retired ex-Army. And on family night, which was Wednesday night, when you could bring your children and they did a big dinner and Dale was the guy's name. He would come and buy all the kids ice cream that came every Wednesday night.
This is not the Miata guy, the BMW guy?
No, that's the guy that passed.
Oh, the Miata driver.
Yes. But the guy that caused the accident, the reason he was screaming in the phone.
I was going to ask you, what was the reason why he was upset?
He had lost a $3.5 million job. He was in the tech industry. His partner went to a meeting for him and he had to come by to a birthday party, which was in my neighborhood. And he let his partner go to this meeting and all he had to do was finish things up and sign the paperwork for this the contract for this $3.5 million job. And somehow he lost the job. So the reason he was screaming is because his partner had just called him and told him they didn't get the job. And that's why he was upset. So he wound up, he got a good attorney.
So why was he driving so fast? I know he was
because
upset.
He was furious. He was just so, he had made a wrong turn and went up a dead end road and was having problems finding his way out of the neighborhood.
I see.
So he threw a fit. And then he tried claiming that he had some condition where he was claiming that he was kind of out of it when he was going down the road and that he slouched forward and put his foot on the gas. And I said, first off, I checked into this guy and I found out that he goes racing on the weekends. He has a BMW that's all fixed up for racing. And that's what he does. And what I saw from him when he blew the stop sign at 75 miles an hour and went around the field goal post, which is a slight turn.
Suicidal.
86 miles an hour. He was in perfect control of the car. It was perfectly centered in the lane. And he was not out.
You think he was suicidal at that moment or psychosis?
No, I think he was just so furious that he went into such a rage that he lost control. And the attorney he got hired one of the big name attorneys that works on big cases like Hollywood stars, and that's who he hired. And they managed to make enough mistakes on the paperwork that it kept getting kicked back until it went long enough that the civil suit couldn't happen. And in court, they claimed that he had this temporary condition that he was never going to have again, that's what happened that day. And he got out of the whole thing.
That's incredible. See, I was assuming, without even knowing, that he was guilty as charged by some of these attorneys. I'm looking at the case. Attorney R.G. Leoner, I believe it was, right?
Oh, you're looking it up?
I'm looking it up, yes.
Oh, okay. I don't remember the guy's name. I did see his face, obviously, in court.
So whatever happened to him?
Well, he served no time. He got away.
No time at all. Somebody's dead. And this guy, the alibi was this. What was really the excuse?
Well, they did know that he lost that job and that he was furious, and they somehow played that into causing this event that he supposedly had happen to him that caused him to go unconscious and crash.
That's absolutely incredible. But when you testified, again, how did the judge or jury react to your account after the jury deliberated?
They were fine. I was on the stand for 2.5 hours, and that was pretty early on. And then they never did have me back because they had me go the second day in case they had other questions for me, but they never did call me in.
So some visions are obviously symbolic. And I always wonder, do you know, by the way, who Juscelino Nóbrega da Luz is? This is one of our guests from Brazil. He's known worldwide.
That name sounds familiar.
Precognition. He essentially for decades has been sending letters to, for example, Princess Diana, years and years before the event that killed her. And what he does, he writes these letters, goes to the post office, stamps them. Right, they're certified letters stamped, and the people receive them. Sometimes they respond, sometimes they don't respond. But he basically explains how things are going to happen, and he has an incredible track record. Have you written your things down in a diary, dated?
No, I just learned to start paying attention to the dates.
Right.
Because I didn't ever feel that anyone would be interested in this stuff, that it would be worth recording at all.
Wow. You'd be surprised. Obviously, you know now.
Well, yeah. Yeah, and I haven't had that many more of them. There have been quite a few through my life, and some of them were smaller things like confrontations with people, things that were very, very emotional. And as I mentioned to you, one of them was my daughter passing.
Oh, no. I don't think that. No, you did not.
Oh, so I was in on my computer and my wife was pregnant. My son was over 2 years old. And I had a vision of me finding my daughter dead in the crib. And I knew it was real. So I went out to the couch and I put my head on my wife's stomach and I started crying. And she asked me what was wrong. And I said, I'm just having an emotional moment. And, after a few minutes, I walked away and was trying to deal with it. Well, my daughter was born, and at 3 months, we realized something was wrong, and we took her to the doctors and found out that she had SMA, spinal muscular atrophy, and that she was going to pass. So my daughter enjoyed her baths. Well, I found that out after the first couple of weeks. So every day I gave her a bath. And when we found out she was going to pass, I gave her a bath, a long bath, and gave her a rub down every day. The doctor said that obviously she really likes that because she smiled the whole time I did it. And, we watched the disease progress. And so it came to the one night where I was giving my daughter the bath and my wife showered and she came out from her shower and she said, why don't you let me dress Sammy and you go get your shower? So I went in and got my shower and I came out of the shower and I walked down the hall. And when I got to the living room, which is where I gave her bath, I stopped dead in my tracks, took 2 steps back and I went, and my wife goes, what's wrong? And I said, nothing. And she said, well, obviously something's wrong. And I said, no, don't worry about it. Well, I realized that that was the outfit she was wearing when I found her in the crib.
Oh.
So that night, normally she went to sleep on my chest every night and I put her in bed between 7 and 8. So that night I figured was my last night. So I kept her on my chest. And finally, my wife and I had stayed up late that night. We used to stay up and watch, some MTV and stuff like that. And we usually went to bed pretty late, 11 o'clock, 11:30. And my wife kept saying, are you going to put Sammy in bed? And I kept saying, oh, in a little bit, Well, finally she goes, it's 11:45. You need to take Sammy and put her in bed. And I said, okay. And I put her in bed. Well, I woke up at 5 o'clock and I knew, and I came in and, told my wife, she's gone. Well, I had never told my wife about the vision. I couldn't. I didn't tell my wife until years after she died. And I said, you remember how I walked down the hall and I went, ah, and I took 2 steps back and you asked me what was wrong. And she said, yeah. And I said, I recognized the clothes that were on her, that's what she was wearing when I found her dead. And I knew that she was getting close. So I had a feeling it was that night. I said, that's why I kept her on my chest till almost midnight.
Was it that night?
It was that night.
So sorry to hear.
Thank you.
So some visions are symbolic, obviously, but others are literal. How do you tell the difference?
Well, all of mine have been things that I'm going to get hurt or it's very emotional. So, I mean, obviously, it's trying to tell me, I feel giving me the opportunity to stop it or change course, something. So I don't know how to answer that.
See, we're told by the so-called experts there's so many dimensions, that there are parallel universes, that what's happening now might be happening somewhere else in the past or in the future, and everything bleeds. You have heard probably of the Mandela effect, for example. It's one of those things that, do I believe it, do I not? But then again, I grew up, was born in the late 60s, 70s. I remember a lot of things. And now I'm told Fruit of the Loom did not have this, the cornucopia. The word normality. This is what I used to hear all the time before. Now I don't hear it anymore. Now everybody says normalcy. And I wonder if it's true that maybe one day we wake up and we are actually entering a different timeline with other people who remember, others who don't. Do you believe that when what you're accessing is maybe you're bleeding to a different dimension where things are happening very similar to here? How do you think? Obviously, we live in a materialistic world. We have to prove. St. Thomas, we have to touch in order to believe, right? So how is it that you... What is your conclusion as to what happens when you have these visions?
Well, that was my biggest question all along. And I think you pretty much summed it up. It's either bleed over or somehow you're able to see down into the future. But I think it's more likely that there are parallel universes and it happened before, or as Carrie used to say, we're repeating the Iron Age on the planet and that we're reliving these lives over and over again. It may be the same life that I've lived dozens of times already, and I got killed in different ways in those accidents, and this time I didn't.
Have you ever had hypnotic regression?
I have not, but I'd like to do it.
I think you'd be a great candidate. I bet you a lot of things would make sense to you.
Yes, and one thing that you mentioned Indians at the beginning of the show. When I was a kid, I always believed that I was an Indian in my last life. And I mean, I built a functioning teepee, and I'm talking about when I was in middle school. 12, 13, 14 years old. I built two of them in the yard, but one of them was really nice, and I had all the bark laid on, overlapping, so you could sit in it in the rain, and the water ran down the outside of the bark. Had the hole in the top. It was made with the poles. Could put a fire in the middle, and the air went out the top. Everything. I did a totem pole.
So it's almost like past life memory. Like some of these children that say, I know who killed me. I know exactly where I'm buried. And you go back and it's a case that has been open for years or decades, and the police, lost the trail. Then the family takes the person to that place, and there is the person. And when he's asked, who killed you? Well, the person lives in such and such, and he's probably still alive. And when you go to court with this, obviously, if we have DNA testing, then we can pinpoint, we found some DNA, here. But otherwise, how can a court approve of the information? Because you have people like Sylvia Brown, who passed away years ago. And I remember, and I'm not comparing her to you at all, but I remember she said in court years before, this person is already dead. And then 15, 20 years later, this woman, a reporter, comes to her and said, you remember that case that you said that little girl? Yeah, oh yeah, definitely. She's dead, definitely dead. Well, I am that person. I'm still alive. So could this be why the courts do not take this seriously?
Oh, interesting. I didn't know about that one. I would think, there's always a chance that you could be wrong. A false vision or something, but all of mine have been dead on.
Do you ever worry about false alarms or misinterpretation?
No, because I learned at a young age, especially when the boy fell from the fence, that I knew exactly what was going on, and I was very easily able to recognize what the event was going to be.
I've heard that correct me if I'm wrong, you probably know more about this than I do, but that emotion often colors psychic experiences. Do you feel visions through emotion or through imagery?
Wow. I don't know. I mean, when my visions happen, I'm not in what I would consider an emotional state. They just like come to me out of nowhere. So
when that happens out of nowhere, they come to you as a dream, or is it something that happens at any hour of the day?
it's any hour of the day. My eyes are wide awake, wide open. I can be reading, like when I had the vision of my daughter, I was actually online doing research and I just stopped and as soon as the vision started, I stopped reading and watched this whole vision. And, I knew from past ones that it was going to happen exactly like I was going to see what I saw,
With all these electromagnetic frequencies that surround us, the soup that we live in, I'm pretty sure that this might be detrimental to seeing visions. But have you ever tried, you say that you meditate, you go into silence, and it reminds me of Edgar Cayce, who, the sleeping prophet. Have you ever tried to write down when you're in silence meditating?
Well, what I do is I silence my mind, which for me, I'm a pretty smart guy. I've taken some IQ tests lately and was shocked at my results. So and people that are more intelligent tend to never stop thinking, and I think really fast. I'm a problem solver. I mean, I design all kinds of car parts. I build pro touring cars as a hobby. And, people that have problems, people know my name all over the United States and really all over the world. But when people have friends that have problems and need a part designed and made that's not out there, I design it and make it. That's the kind of stuff I do. So, quieting my mind is very difficult, but I learned to do it. And how I learned to do it was listening to people that were saying the same thing as Jesus. God is within you. Go inside of yourself and find. Seek and you will find. Okay. So I started going inside of myself. I would put earplugs in and I could hear my blood pumping in my veins, listening to my heartbeat. And then I did a controlled breathing. So when I started doing out of body, I would lay on the couch reclined.
Now, hold it right there. I mean to interrupt you, but this is a great cliffhanger for part 2. And I also want to ask you so many things when we come back. If anybody's seeing the promotional image, there are eyes in the sky. There's fog, there's the broken road, and there's the cross right at the end. A very mysterious, very, very indicative to what you have gone through. And we're going to discuss that in part 2. I usually say, how can people learn more about your work, your book, and so on, but you have none of these, right?
Correct.
So, one more hour to come with Charles Poloka. This is Mel, and you are listening to VERITAS. We'll be right back. Here's a track from Truth Frequency. You won't hear anywhere else. If you like what you hear, you can get the full track at veritas7.com on the page for today's guest. Thank you for listening to the first part of this important Veritas episode. To hear the rest and access all of our exclusive content, head over to the Veritas Plus member section or click the subscribe button at veritas7.com. While you're there, don't forget to visit the Veritas store, featuring a range of great products, including Focus Life Force Energy. Experience the benefits with a 15-day free trial of FLFE, no credit card required. Want to get in touch? Be a guest on the program? Suggest someone or share feedback? Just click the contact button at veritas7.com. Thank you for listening to Veritas, because you don't want to believe, you want to know.